Hello everybody and welcome back to Read and Reread. Welcome if you are new to my channel. I just started a couple of weeks ago and I have a couple other videos in here if you like what you watched today. And please give me a like and consider subscribing. Today I'm going to talk about my May 2022 TBR list, which is highly likely to not follow this pattern at all. So we'll see at the end of the month whether I adhered to these predictions or not. Generally, my habit is I read one book at a time, and when I'm done, then I think about what I feel like reading next. I don't have a big long-term plan, but sometimes I do kind of have a few things kind of in my docket. And it might have to do with things that I need to read to get back to the library, or something I'm very, very excited about. A new book has come out by an author that I really love, and things like that. This month is kind of wide open. I have a few things I need to look at because of different clubs or groups that I want to participate in. So I'm just going to go over what I'm planning to read, and then we'll just compare at the end of the month what actually happened. Who knows? All right, so I've kind of divided these into sort of genre categories, and first I have new kind of contemporary or new releases. So the book that I'm actually reading, I just started this book last night, is The Maid by Nita Prose. And The Maid is, I think this is a debut first novel by Nita Prose, and it is about a girl named Molly who a young woman she's actually 25, and she has a job as a maid at a rather upscale hotel. They don't exactly specify, or haven't yet, but she appears to be on the autism spectrum or neuroatypical in some manner. And so she is very much, she's really into this job. She's really into the routine, the people she sees every day, the satisfaction of the job well done, and she's a little discombobulated because her beloved grandmother that raised her has recently died, and so she's just rather alone and adrift. So one day while she is going about her rounds, a very prominent customer who frequently comes to the hotel, she finds him dead in his bed when she comes in to clean. And because of her unusual demeanor, the police are kind of taken aback by her response to the situation. And so she is kind of under the microscope. So it's going to be a murder mystery with an unusual protagonist who has some neurodiversity. So that's pretty cool to read it, and I haven't gotten very far yet, but I'm really liking Molly, and I like a good murder mystery, so high hopes that will continue to be a good book. Okay, the other one that's kind of a newer book that has been shelf-shaming me for a couple of months is The Love Song of W.E.B. Dubois. And this is a big old hefty book, which that's my trepidation. Like, I have trouble if a book is really big and thick. I don't have any problem reading it, and once I get into it, I'll just go and go. But I don't know, it's like I have to be in the right mood to embark upon a great big book. I don't know why. It's like the commitment just sort of rises up in front of me. But I have heard from friends of mine that this is really good, and also just reading the reviews, it's come up in a lot of other people's videos. And I'm reading this blurb on the back from Jacqueline Woodson, who is an author that I enjoy, and she says, "This sweeping, brilliant, and beautiful narrative is at once a love song to black girlhood, family history, joy, pain, and so much more. In Jeffers' deft hands, the story of race and love in America becomes the great American novel." Like, whoa, the great American novel, that's really high praise. And it chronicles the journey of one American family from the centuries of the colonial slave trade through the Civil War to our own tumultuous era. And it circles around one woman named Eyre Pearl Garfield, who is discovering her heritage and history up to the present day. So I'm excited to read it. Even when I'm looking at it again, I'm like, why haven't I read this yet? But I picked it up a couple of months ago when Barnes & Noble had that big sale right after Christmas when everything was half off. These were all gone. But then I found it at Book People in Austin when I was there shortly thereafter. And so I went ahead and bought it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I got it. And then I haven't read it. So, Shelf Shamer, I'm coming for you. All right, now we have a couple of books in the science fiction or fantasy category. First of all, I have a book. I'm not probably going to actually reread this, but kind of refresh and review through it for a discussion group that I am in. And that is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. I know this was a very popular book last year, and I liked it a lot. And then I passed it to my daughter, and she really enjoyed it too. And then she bought one for a friend. And I really love the Darker Shade of Magic trilogy as well by this author. This book, it's not exactly time travel, but it's kind of the related notion of like someone who is like immortal or frozen in time. And so I'm into that too. So this is about a woman who makes a deal with someone who we're not sure how much of a devil he is, but he is certainly has a dark aspect to him. And she, back in the 1714 is when it begins, and she is on the verge of being married against her will. She doesn't want to give up her freedom. She's not happy with the limitations of life in a small French village in 1714, and so someone appears to her in her moment of despair and offers her a deal. And the deal is that she can be on her own, be free, and live forever, but no one will ever remember her. And she takes the deal, not really thinking through all the implications. What it means is that she could meet somebody and have the most wonderful time with them. The minute she walks out of the room and comes back in, they've never seen her before. So she never has relationships that last. She can have a beautiful evening with someone, but the next day they don't know who she is. As soon as they go to sleep and wake up, there's a stranger. So she goes through the centuries as a 23-year-old woman and just goes on and on like that until one day in New York City in a bookstore she meets a man who remembers her. And what that means and why makes a wonderful story. If you've never read it, I highly recommend it. And it makes me want to read it again, so maybe it will end up being a reread. Also, I followed up on my excitement about rereading the Tripods trilogy, and I found a secondhand copy of The Possessors by John Christopher, which is one of the books he wrote for adults. And I had read some reviews that this was his best adult book, so I found this copy on a secondhand seller. It is copyright 1964, and it was withdrawn from the Annapolis Area Christian School. So it is a book withdrawal, a library book withdrawal, so their loss is my gain, and I'm very excited to read a book by this author that I have never read before. My last category is classics. All right, so one thing I've really been trying to do this year is to intersperse rereading classics that I haven't read in a long time, or favorites, or other books that I want to reread, or things that have just been lingering on my shelves for a really long time. And I'm kind of trying to mix that in between the new books that I get so excited about and going back to older things. So I am going to read this month for sure Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. In honor of this mention, I have worn my Jane Eyre necklace, which I got from Tiny Booktown on Etsy. And Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte is, of course, the story of the young girl who takes a governess job in a big old spooky mansion with a gruff and mysterious man who has a crazy wife in the attic. I know this is not a spoiler alert, I hope, because most people do know the general structure of Jane Eyre. But it is an interesting, it's a very weird as a love story, and I want to reread it now and see what I think about it now as opposed to the last times that I have read this book. The classic book group that I belong to on Facebook has, every month they post up 4 books for discussion, and this was one of them. So because I was wanting to reread Jane Eyre anyway, I thought, well, now here it is. This is the time. So I'm going to read that again and see how it flies for me. And also, I'm going to flip through The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, which is one of the other selections. And I did read this last year, so I don't really want to reread it right now, but I want to just go through it and refresh my mind and then be able to participate in that discussion as well. In honor of the Bronte-isms of this video, I also wore this t-shirt today. If you know, you know. And then finally, I just want to do a shout out to my favorite girl, Flannery O'Connor. And something that I do when I read is when I finish a book, I don't pick up the next book like immediately. I usually don't start another book until the following day maybe. And I like to do what I call a palate cleanser in between, and I'll read a couple of short stories, either something, usually like favorite ones from the past that I haven't read in a while. So I'll go back and read some short stories or some poems. And so lately I have been pulling out the Flannery O'Connor and rereading some of my favorite stories by this author. And the one I'm really hung up on is my favorite one, Good Country People, which I reread about a week or so ago. And now I was just thinking about it this morning. It's like, wait a minute, I need to read it again. And I need to see if I can find some discussion of it somewhere, because the story has just blown me away for decades. So I'm kind of picking this up off and on in between books and rereading some of her best short stories. So I might do another video at some point that's more spoiler included video where we talk about some of those stories if anybody's interested. All right, so that is the wrap up of what I have in mind. Inevitably I will find other things. I've been watching some videos about the Women's Prize shortlist being announced, and I had read a couple of those books. But the one that's on there that I have not read that I really, really want to read is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. So I'm hoping to come upon a copy of that so that might intersperse here and cut in front of something else. Or, you know, I just find random things at the library or half price or somewhere. Who knows? But I will keep you posted and we'll see how it goes. But happy reading in the month of May, everybody. Have a great day.